First question.
Okay, this is probably gonna be one for you. In Lemuria, there was no Lemuria, and then the mountain rose up, and then the mountain went back down. Where did the people come from? How did they get to Lemuria? It wasn't there, and then it was. How did the people get there?
We're talking, first of all, have you been part of the meetings where we told you about how that happened? Okay. So that is a bubble of magma that's pushed it up to a small continent. And now, how did the people get to wherever they are? I mean, in Australia, there was a land bridge and all that. Uncertain. And there weren't that many of them at first. So I don't know the answer to the original humans.
And Kryon never gave a time frame of when the bubble of magma was pushed up underneath.
But it would have been thousands of years.
We weren't given the time frame of when that began.
Right.
We were given the time frame of when that began to subside.
Right.
We were given from Kryon that the beginnings of Lemurian society started about 50,000 years ago. So it is presumed that the bubble of magma in the mountain of Lemuria was there in existence 50,000 years ago. Your question specifically relates to what of those first humans inhabiting that area, where did they come from? Great question. Don't know.
You know, because we get the impression, I get compressions when I channel. That's another story, if anybody asked that. I get a lot more.
Hey, Lee, what happens when you channel?
Well, I get a lot more than I channel, and they come in. So during all of those channels, the idea of this mini-continent was there before humans. I mean, it's a geological event, which could be, tens of thousands of years. In that period of time, they could have come by canoes or whatever, and from other islands, and however they got there, there were humans there when it all started. Yeah.
I'm going to go to this gentleman here.
In the Lemurian Scrolls...
Speak into the microphone, and then people can hear you.
Hello. In the Lemurian Scrolls, it actually shows you pictures of people coming into Lemuria and how they were accepted by the first people that were there.
And he's speaking... Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, English. Rubbish. Anyway, and I think what happened is what Monica said, from the outskirts, they didn't live there totally alone on their own. They must have been somewhere, because from that point is where they interbred.
Right, and so there's a lot there that we don't understand or know about humans before the seeding process, and we didn't have a soul back then either. Now, what you're talking about is the Lemurian Scrolls. Now that is, and would you please tell who the guru was?
Sure, it was Guru Deva. He had a longer name, but he was affectionately known as Guru Deva, who founded the Hindu monastery on Kauai.
And he's the one who wrote a book and channeled it called the Lemurian Scrolls. Mm-hmm. It's on Amazon, but it's a very Hindu book. And by that I mean it has their traditions and all of the things. We celebrate this whole thing because here's a very, very well-known Hindu, well-received man who decided to come to Hawaii because it was Lemuria, then he channeled it and wrote the Lemurian Scrolls. I think it was it's a validation for us as what we believe, that this is a lot bigger than we think.
Next question.
My question is about Mars, and I've seen books where they say they think there was a civilization once that was a thriving planet full of people, and I was wondering if Kryon ever talked about the civilization that lived on Mars.
Not specifically about Mars, but specifically about us. However, it really does beg the question, if we're a lot older, if we are 50,000 years old as a civilization, like the DNA shows the Aborigine, is it possible that we had high technology? Is it possible that we actually found some of the things that Kryon says we now don't know about yet? And that would be manipulation of physics and all manner of things. I doubt very much that Mars had Martians. I think if there were civilizations, it was us. Greg Braden, as a scientist, presents these questions in so many different ways, but the most intriguing ones is what they've discovered on the moon that you don't know about. When the Freedom of Information Act allowed the pictures that the astronauts took on the moon to be revealed, and everybody could have them, they were still pixelated out in certain sections. There's no better way to ask to show that, there was a secret than releasing pictures that you took where you pixelated out stuff. What was pixelated out and what now shows on some things that didn't pixelate out are right angles. Nature does not make right angles anywhere. And that was, in so many places you can see it on the moon's surface. Now, Greg's proposition is that it was us.
Yeah. And just to add to that theme, when you're exploring Mars, yesterday I talked about a group in Africa called the Dogons, and their claim that they have been visited by extraterrestrials from the Sirius star system. One of the things that they believe is that though they were amphibious of nature in the water, and that they are residing in the moons of Jupiter until such time that the Earth is ready to receive them.
So, really fascinating things are happening. Now, can I just give you a bottom line? These things will occupy us if we're not careful. And Kryon says, think about it, but don't ponder it too hard because you've got other things to do as light workers. Because it's so fascinating that we can just go there and hover.
And the litmus test is, how is this helping the planet?
That's right.
That's what Kryon asked.
Right.
How am I helping anyone by getting so obsessed about this area?
Yes.
Earlier, you talked about the connection between consciousness and the magnetic grid.
Yes.
And you said that consciousness affects the magnetic grid.
Yes.
And you also said that by affecting the magnetic grid, we could raise consciousness. How is it possible for us to affect the magnetic grid?
Oh, because I didn't give you the rest of the story. Well, when they saw what 9/11 did in two fronts, this was both at Princeton and also HeartMath, two different kinds of experiments running at the same time, didn't expect 9/11. What they got was billions of people doing something all at once, and they saw a spike. Okay, that led them to believe at that time, and this is the way logic works, that things like tragedies then affect the grid and affect consciousness. And they left it there until the rescue of the 33 miners. More people saw that than landing on the moon, and it did the same thing. So you got the same kind of spikes on the rescue. So we're starting to see that celebration and joy and euphoria had the same effect. So when we are starting to look at what we can do, and that gets into the field, what would happen if we had the ability to manifest as a group these kinds of joyful feelings? This is where Lynn McTaggart comes in. Because these are the experiments that she has done with world events happening, world summits. So you'll have people all over the world. Now, if you were here yesterday, you saw a little of that on the promo I had for the movie, The One Peel, that's coming out. So where I'm going is that we may very well be able to connect in a way that changes the planet. Not just praying for a certain thing, but actually raising the vibration together. This is fairly old on a concept metaphysically, but what's new is now we have the measurements that show it works. For me, that's exciting. I'm an engineer, and I always came from, can we measure it? Can we see it? And that's what kept me out of the woo-woo for so long, is that it just seemed to be so much talk, and now it isn't.
Next question.
Kryon talks about the extinction of animals and climate change as being a natural thing. What about human activity and the role that that plays into it?
I think that Monica can answer that too. We are animals, and we will do the same thing that animals do with animals. We have to understand that long before we got here, there was displacement of species. Animals would come in and they would change the whole landscape, and then they would leave, and others would come in and change the whole landscape. Part of that whole thing is us. However, we have a responsibility to life on the planet. So if we're going to displace a species just because we're ignorant enough to go into an area that they're in, I think we owe it to continue their species somehow, somewhere else. If it is a natural displacement and we look at it because we're here and sharing their air or something, that's different. And I think we have to know the difference. One of the things we see is that we are compassionate and we have brains that animals don't, and that leads us to want to save them all. That may sound, this is very controversial, and I'll get letters, but maybe that's not exactly what we should be doing. Do you have something to say about that as a naturalist and it grew up?
I think my background is a national park ranger. I did that for 15 years, but now I'm almost in this spiritual path, probably the same amount of time. I haven't calculated. I pondered this question a lot. Everything I did before was endangered species, programs for saving them, etc. Really thinking we were in such trouble because of all of the environmental issues that has been directly happened from human activity. My feeling on the way forward is that it's going to be two things that turn it around. One is an alliance with Gaia. When every human on the planet can feel what the indigenous have intuitively, Mother Earth is our source for everything, and we have an alliance with her. And the second one is wisdom. When you have wisdom, then you don't create a human activity that has a negative impact on Gaia around you.
The other thing, too, just to continue that, if you want to start checking off the things that you have to think of, is that if we're irresponsible with pollution and all that, and it wipes out animals, that is not a natural occurring event. That's us being unwise. So there you have that. Can I just tell you what Kryon has said when he talks about climate change and all these things? I'm not going to get into that unless you ask me, because what Kryon has said is happening. But the one thing that I remember the most, he says that, go ahead, he said, you haven't caused this. What you believe started out as global warming and now is climate change, and eventually will be called cycle change. But he said, you didn't cause it. But he said, what you have caused is perhaps, if you're not careful, your own extinction. He said that the earth is very resilient and it's going to keep going. But you've got to be careful, because as you start to pollute, don't worry about Gaia. Think about yourselves, your civilization. You can easily terminate yourself.
Next question.
I came in believing that we decided our next lifetime before we came in. You have said a couple of times that we really don't decide until the last moment, and then it's decided. However, today in the channeling, you talked about you already know what your next lifetime is, so it's kind of confusing to me, and I'm wondering if you could...
It's because there's various levels and strata of that. It's not a simple cookie-cutter thing where this is how it works. So one of the things that Kryon says is at the moment of the wind of the birth, and I'm listening to the channel that just came in, because he hasn't talked about this before in the timing, we have what we're going to do, what the karma is going to be as far as if there is karma about your group. And so who are we going to come in with, what's going to happen? Then he goes on to say there are some who do multiple lifetime plans, not just the one plan. So that means that there will be a first lifetime plan. When they come in, they'll come in and make the decision about multiple lifetimes. So that's the decision. Then the next time they come in, it's in that plan. So that's just one of the layers of the complexities that I'm getting during channel of what are the decisions when you come in. It's more than that. And then he started talking about the soulmates and all that. And I'm realizing that one of the other things, even during channel I got it, that some of you are with soulmates from former lifetimes you made agreements with. And so they have come in with you and so now you have a collective decision, not just yours of what I'm going to do, but now there's a collective decision of souls, what will we do together? So that becomes a one decision at the same moment you all enter in together. Well, you don't, because you're different ages. How does that work? And again, Kryon says it works very well. It suspends your logic of timing and all of these things. It goes way beyond that. So we have to agree on something, that we don't understand everything. And we have to also agree, and intellectuals don't, that there's only we can only go think a certain level. I mean, there has to be a ceiling on how smart we are and what we can think. And intellectuals say, no, we can think about whatever. But Kryon says, you live in a black and white world, and you don't even know there's color. So you cannot take a sightless person and tell them about 256 hues of color. You just can't. It's just not possible, especially if they're sightless from birth. And this is the kind of thing that Kryon feeds us all the time about. There really is a limitation to what you can understand about reality in this corporeal dimension that you're in. And some of the things you just got to go with. I don't understand it, it's okay. Can I say, if you've heard the channels, you've heard this 100 times, because it's one of Kryon's favorite things. He says, when you go out and get in your car, do you go and study the manual about how the internal combustion engine works before you step on the gas? And the answer is no. And the reason is because it just works. And it worked when you bought it. You didn't study it then either. So there's trust that some of the most complicated things you don't understand work, and you just go with it. And that's the kind of thing we're looking at here.
This next question.
This is going to go back to the first book.
Okay.
Because every time I gave it to somebody, I told them, there's a question in there you got to answer. So, the graduate status, is that still available?
Oh, yes. Can I explain graduate status?
Please.
All right. Let's go back for a moment to my questions yesterday when we were talking about where did we come from, how old are we, and then, of course, are we alone? And that was, then we talked about the indigenous and the idea we've come from the stars. All right, so stay with me. Was there potentially a plan like we have of ascension, of learning, of higher consciousness on other planets around this galaxy? And the answer, Kryon says, is of course. And then he says, what has happened? You are the new kids on the block, so you are just going through the elementary of this. There are full civilizations that have been here over 1 million years before you. Did you know there's 4 life starts on this planet? 4 billion-year-old planet had life start 4 times before it took, and we even got life late. That doesn't even include, the evolution and humanity and all. So we really have not been here very long. It really looks at a 13 billion-year-old galaxy. There could be, of those billions of Earths that the Kepler experiment showed were there, not Earths, but habitable zone planets, many of them have civilizations. One of them was Pleiadian. How long had they been there? Kryon says over 1 million years. In that time, did they go through, after they were like us, did they go through what we went through? Yes. And he said, more dramatically than you did. Now, are you ready for some eye-rolling stuff? Now, here's where it gets into, Lee, you're absolutely nuts and you're crazy. And that's what's going to be on your tombstone. Because people are going to remember this more than anything else. This has happened over and over in our galaxy, that one civilization has gone into graduate status. This means that they have such a high level vibration that it starts to blur into who's an angel and who is not. And in that, suddenly, physics changes. You have control over things like your placement, time, whatever. Did they have ships to get here? No. That's a graduate status. They are now part of their soul group. They're not even corporeal unless they want to be. That's how high. That's graduate status. Will we get there? Who knows? How long will it take? A long time. Now, he's asking how far can I tell you how awful it was? A genocide on other planets around their sun. Where do you think Star Wars came from? This is what Kryon said in Channel. The idea of planetary genocide from the outside. And they said, Kryon says they did it. They recovered from that. They recovered. This is what Kryon has said. We won't know that for a very, very long time when we meet them or they meet us when we're no longer dangerous. And they start looking and talking and we'll find out history. Now, here's the thing though. Okay, did anybody see them? And who did Kryon say it was? Arcturians. So now you have their planet being seeded by the Arcturians because the Arcturians went into graduate status. This galaxy is very, very old. You know, when you start looking at time, if we've been here 200,000 years old, if you could give a segment, a sliver on the screen, and you want to compare it to several million, or even 10 or whatever, or start looking at billion years, and it's just ridiculously small compared to the overview. We really haven't been here hardly at all. It really begs the question, were civilizations in this galaxy a long time, maybe even before we began to have life on the planet? And if so, did they go through what we did? And if so, is there a lot of stuff here? I'll just go for the big one. What's the big plan? Why? Just why? And it's, the meaning of life. And every single time I go there, Kryon says, yes, there's a reason. And it has to do with vibration of your galaxy, and you know what it is when you're not here. And it's important enough for all of you to go through this. It's about energy, vibration, light and dark. It's so interesting, and it's not a decision like you think. We all go to oh my God, we're going to fight Satan. And that's what's going on. And Kryon says, no, it has to do with something a lot more elegant than that. And that is, where is your galaxy going to go eventually in vibration, because it's going to interface with the rest of the universe. And that's going to be important. And I think it all has to do with increasing light everywhere. It's bigger than I can talk about, because I don't have the kind of brain that will go there. But I'll tell you, when I've been channeling these kinds of things and Kryon starts to show me things, and he says, there's a song that plays. It's a metaphor, music. There's a song that plays when you're not here. And all of you know it. And when you leave this place and you go back to the source, that's all you hear is the song. And the song is a metaphor representing the purpose of why you've come. And it's a song that's beautiful and joyful. It's a melody that you never will forget. It's in your corporeal cells as well. And it's all a metaphor for the compassion of God, that there's a purpose for you coming and going and coming and going. And that's the best it's ever got to why are we here. So there's not a logic that we are seeing here that applies to that. It's way, way beyond that. But there is a reason why these things are happening in our galaxy, and why one planet goes into graduation and wants to then seed another and see where the energy is going to go there. And we are the only ones right now with this choice. We are the newest ones and the only ones in this series. It leads me to believe that our galaxy is teeming with life that knows a lot about this, and we know nothing. That's how young we are. But we're on the cusp of starting to understand and know, just on the cusp of it. And our journey on this planet has just begun as souls. We've passed this marker of horror and low energy. Kryon says there's a demarcation point, that 2012, someday you'll look back and call everything before 2012 the barbaric years. That we will have high consciousness. It doesn't just mean there'll be no more war. It means that there's going to be inventions given to us when that starts to happen that will change everything. I mean everything. There won't be any more poverty because all things are possible and doable, and everyone gets fed. I mean, that's because we're not using physical resources anymore like we did before. There's things coming that you don't know about that start to solve the problems that you think are forever on the planet. They're only there during the barbaric years. Isn't that interesting to think about? About a situation where we have plenty of power and water and food, and where health is not a big issue anymore because we know how to heal everything. Now that sounds like a stupid, ridiculous thing that I made up. And I will, and Kryon says, Lee, just grin and say, we'll talk later about it when it happens, because we'll all be here.
And one of the things that it's such a big deal, this making it to graduate status, when I wrote the Geyer Effect, I asked a question to Kryon. If there's so many others in the galaxy that have been through this test, were there other planets that did not make it? That was my question. And Kryon said, yes, there were other planets that did not pass the marker. And in those cases, they either terminated themselves or their biology continued, but the divine spark that was in them went away.
Now, that's profound. Now, I had forgotten that. Thank you for adding that. But interesting. Yeah, they didn't all make it. Yeah.
And so I guess when people do talk about alien abduction and things like that, Kryon says the first thing that they cannot harm you when they see your light and stand in your power, and that we are protected. But potentially that may explain that there are those in the galaxy that are biological that no longer have a divine spark, or those that are biology with never even receiving it, but they want it. Next question.
We know that Kryon has said we've been here for about 200,000 years or so. Clearly the planet's very old, and there was life on this planet millions and millions of years. Dinosaurs, for example. Did they evolve from little single cells like we think, or can you tie that in any way?
Evolution, as presented by Darwin, has been proven over and over. We can even see it in the way things happen here with short lifespans. And for instance, in fish in a cave and they lose their eyes in several generations because they don't need them anymore. Yes, and that is all very, very natural and explainable. The dinosaur issue is really interesting to talk about because we always talk about the termination of them and what happened and could it happen again and whatever. It was a different planet then. It was cooling then, and then so the answer is probably not. But all of that was natural. But we get into what took place for humanism, and suddenly it isn't natural. Because that's when the computer simulations are saying, you couldn't have gotten to that place that quickly. Well, it means in 200,000 years, that's only since we've been seeded. That's with the soul. But it means that before that, there was an acceleration somehow to get us to the place where we can have that soul. That was... I love that because it shows that spirit is involved even from the beginning. So humans in general, and the way we are today, the way we are not just the top of the evolutionary chain, there's a lot more that went on. It was way, way too fast according to all the simulations and the experts and the mathematicians.
Another question?
Thank you. all that you're doing, and I don't think you're one bit out there at all with the what you mentioned might be the weirdest thing you would be known for. I think it's just brilliant. I'm a little bit of a realist about our clutter problem on Earth. And so I'm very enthusiastically trying to pick up all the litter on this planet within 1 year. And so I'm asking for grounding in that so that I can become more of a realist. Because if we pick up all the litter on this planet, then we are not likely to litter space either. So it's all, and the feng shui seminar was just great and really added energy to where
I
I'm
love the
going.
question, and the question needs to be answered. And Kryon has said that a number of issues that we believe are unsolvable are not. But it's going to take two things: a higher consciousness of desire and the inventions that are not here yet that will consume it in a way that you haven't thought of or you don't know about. There's burying it, there's all manner of other things, and there's other ways. And Kryon says you don't know about. So you don't have to physically take it someplace else. You don't have to throw it in space, you don't have to put it in the ground. There's other ways coming. But there has to be the first step. Now, Kryon says that is coming, and it's going to come a little faster than you think. And it's going to come from young people. And there's going to be a consensus as we start healing the planet and more are involved in the ability to do things, with the abundance to do things. And there are a lot of people with a lot of money that are, and there's a lot of things that we don't know about where there's stashes of money, just waiting for certain things. And you would think they'd be waiting for bad things. They're waiting for systems to clean, for instance, the ocean. We've got to get rid of that patch in the middle of the ocean that's as big as a continent. It's plastic, and it's killing, stuff. And Kryon says it may look insurmountable, but it won't be with the funding and the desire. What happened so interestingly, and we've seen it happen when we decided to go to the moon, we didn't have the inventions that would let us. So we all pitched in and figured it out, and in that we had inspirations that gave us the inventions. We didn't even have the math. There were certain mathematic things that had to be invented for orbital insertion and all these crazy things. But they arrived when we needed them because there was not only funding, but there was the desire. Now, Greg Braden talks about something very esoteric scientifically. And he talks about the double slot experiment with light, which shows that light can be in two places at the same time. But more than that, he speaks of what they discovered, that when light turns from a particle to a wave and back and forth, it will not do it unless it's being observed. Now, I just gave you two things to think about, which are conundrums, and if you don't know any physics, what if that also applies to consciousness? That things manifest when we can imagine them, when we observe them. And there is so much to be said about synchronicity. Who do you want to meet? When do you want to meet them? All of this. What do you think your plan is? As you start working this puzzle, you're going to run right into them. It's almost like you created that which you manifest things. That's metaphysics 101. We manifest things. And people say, wow, you're so lucky. I don't know if anybody has said this to you in your life, if you're one of those, where you say, you are the luckiest person I've ever met. You found this thing, you did this, you went here, and it has nothing to do with luck. It's back to that basic physics that Greg Braden talks about, is you can change reality. We've watched it with light. You observe it and suddenly it moves and changes. It's not just that it responds to human consciousness. It's something about the interaction of physics, imagining it, seeing it, and manifesting it. We've seen this so many places. What if it applies to our lives? Well, I think it does, and that's what we teach, because that's metaphysics. So we are not victims of the planet. We just hope you're going to get out of this room and not be hit by a truck. That doesn't occur to us. This is not what we teach. We are in the right place at the right time. And many times, and Kryon alluded to it in the channel this morning, and I knew where it was going, and we never finished it. And maybe it was so we could talk about it now. The thing is, are you protected? When you get to a place where you start thinking this way and knowing that you are able to do things with your consciousness, like we teach. It's just so hard to even talk about because people want the steps of it, but you awaken to a higher level of believing that you're here for a purpose. And when you start looking at yourself and coming to these kind of meetings and you hear these kinds of things, there is a way of steering you into the right place. I was steered. Kryon alluded to it. I might not have even be here today if I had done what I thought I was here for. And I was stopped. I want to know hands. How many of you have been stopped from doing something? Okay, thank you. Wow, it's about 70% of you. Now, if I were to ask you raising a hand, do you now understand why? All right, so you know the principle. Doesn't that tell you that there's a greater power that knows what you're doing? I mean, it does, and it doesn't have anything to do with your religion. This has to do with your personal belief system. Are you in control of the reality that's you or not? Or are you a victim of the planet? We have a long way to go to even explain this to people. Many of us are living it and can't explain it. And I've got so many stories in no time where I could tell you I've seen miracle after miracle of synchronicity. Right place, right time. You just would not believe it. It's way outside of chance. And that's what we believe.
Next question down here.
So this goes back a bit to the previous question about the master status, but the question is about free will. And I've heard multiple times that ours is the only location in the galaxy currently that has free will at this time. So that sends me back to think, okay, well, the Pleiadians, at some point, since they went through the same thing we're going through now, at one point they had what we're calling free will, but now they don't. So then the question becomes, is our path out of duality really a path of choosing to be in alignment with spirit? So
you know, you are hovering around some things, but also making some suppositions based upon what you think. So just let me first of all correct, we are the only planet of free choice, not of free will. Now, that's a metaphor. The choice that we have right now, we're the only ones going through the test right now of a dark and light in this scenario. The Pleiadians are still ones of free choice, but they have they're not going through this kind of free choice. So it is conditional, and Kryon has said a long time, the only planet of free choice means you're the only one in the galaxy young enough to be in this test, because all the other ones have gone into graduate status. That's what it means. So Pleiadians, all the others have gone through this. They have a whole nother set of energy situations, but not ours. Ours is real black and white, if you haven't noticed. And we really are fighting darkness. But it's always been here. It's always been here. And the darkness to me, which is low consciousness, low thought. Kryon said something else I wanted to tell you about that is related to all of this. Newbies. He described coming in to this planet. Now I'm getting information. This happens every once in a while during Q A. He was describing the old soul journey. Do you realize that? All of these channels, these last 2 days, have been journey of the old soul. What about the newbies? What about the ones who come in and there is no Akash to remember, and that they're just coming in cold? And Kryon says prisons are filled with them. You see, what happens is you come in, you don't know how anything works. There is no understanding of empathy and some of the higher functions that you think all humanity has, they don't. And so a whole lot will come in, many, without understanding why the rules are the rules. And they're just going to violate them anyway. And there's no consideration of the other human being. There is only survival. They're newbies. They haven't had any experience on the planet. They make mistakes, and they make really bad ones based upon, bad decisions of never having been here. Does it make sense to you? And so as they come in again and again, you start to build understanding of relationships of human to human, how things work, and the reasons why you wouldn't, go out and kill people and all. There's always the unbalances too, but I'm talking about the low consciousness is really ugly. Now, the other thing you might ask is, well, there'll always be newbies, but if the median consciousness starts to raise because of the old souls, those coming in for the first time are going to land with a higher consciousness medium. You know what I mean? So you won't have it near as low. The ones coming into the planet will come in. It's like the temperature of a swimming pool. The temperature's going up. So when they come in again, they're going to enjoy what you've done and start at a higher level. For the newbies, but we haven't been at that higher level. We have been at the lowest level, 30% is what Kryon says, of 100% potential of consciousness is just beyond ugly. And it really does not promote anything that's going to make it go up. And this is why we're so excited. When Kryon first started saying, you're going to make it, you're going to make it, you're going to go through 2012, do you know what that means? And I was saying, no, I really don't know what it means. And she says, you're coming out of the dark. And if you look at all the horror on this planet and the wars and the dictators and the final solution and all of that stuff, you just can't believe what we've done to ourselves. And now, Kryon says, there's light starting to occur. And it's not going to you can't sit in your living room and watch it. You got to be it. That's the instruction. And being it just means walking in the family and having a different attitude, or where you work, having a different attitude, or trying your best in a dark place to show some light. And it's going to go a long, long way, very slowly, to a higher consciousness on this planet where we don't do these things anymore. That sounds like a really rosy Pollyanna big picture. And then Christ says, just remember where you are, because you're just beginning it. This is a battle. And this battle is going to be won by old souls.
Thank you. Can you tell us if the old megalithic stone structures were here from previous civilizations that were more advanced?
We know they were. Our trip to Stonehenge, and just sitting, we had the opportunity because we had a tour there with many, many people, and because we were going to channel every group, we got to stay there basically all day. So we are some of the few that got to spend time in Stonehenge. Especially if you go there now, it's all roped off. You don't even get to go in there, and we were in there. And you start to feel things, and then you start to look around and realize this. How old is that, and how many thousands of years? And the Druids, all of this information that it was used for satanic ceremonies and all these things, and the human sacrifice, and you realize it's aligned with the stars. They knew about the solstices and all these things. This was an advanced civilization that was not necessarily as you think is advanced. They knew about the stars. They had a lot of information through orality about how things worked. We didn't give them any credit at all. There was one when we were in Ireland, I think it was a stone circle. It was one of the biggest ones. And Christ started talking about what was there. And they said, the question was, what kind of ceremonies did they do? And Kryon said, well, you're not going to necessarily understand that, but some of it was sports. It was an arena. One of the stone circles. In fact, the henge is the word for the moat around it, and they had a big buildup of sand all around it. And they were saying, "What is this for?" And Kryon said, "Seats." And that's not what people are telling you, but this shows an advanced civilization that had teams and sports. Now, you might think, "Oh no," if you know. But it gives a whole different perspective of who they might have been. And they might have been a lot more elegant than you think. So yes. Yeah. By the way, this has to be the last question because it's time.
So Kryon's been revealing the nodes and nulls of the planet, and Kryon and the pineal choirs have been going to certain ones. I was wondering if you could talk about Table Mountain, or wondering really why it got passed over for going back to Hawaii for the last choir.
I'm going to let Monica do some of this. The nodes and the nulls really are her study. Kryon.com/nodes, lowercase, will bring you the whole story, where they are on the planet, what they do, and a lot of information that she has put together. So do you understand the question about Table Mountain and a little bit of what she's asking because of the choirs and the Passover?
Well, we're not the choir organisers, so their choice for doing Maui as opposed to Table Mountain, can't comment on. In terms of the nodes and nulls of the planet, when the choirs first began, Kryon said that it wasn't important to necessarily visit a node place if you had the intention. We're talking about quantum. I don't even like using the word quantum. It's multi-dimensional energy, so it's not restricted to a linear space. And there's actually other nodes that the choir has not visited either. Aoraki, Mount Cook in New Zealand, Machu Picchu in Peru. Table Mountain would be just another one. So I guess the idea of the last choir in Maui is like a reunion because that's where the first choir began. So it's a beautiful completion. And those who don't know what I'm talking about, there is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Todd Ovakaites who has been identified by Kryon as a famous scientist that lived in Lemuria. One of the attributes of Dr. Todd in this life is that he developed a toning technique that awakened the pineal, and he started seeing extraordinary results in consciousness change and also physical healing. So he began teaching these to people, and finally Kryon came in and said, "What you're doing is a toning practice that was done in Lemuria 26,000 years ago. Here is your assignment." The assignment was to collect singers and sing at either Mount Shasta or Maui or Hawaii. They were the two places, and to sing it on December 21, 2012. Very specific instructions from Kryon. When that event took place, we all thought it was just going to be a one-off choir. We're done, yippee, great. Through the channeled information from that choir, Kryon started revealing that it was sending a multidimensional message into the galaxy that we have awakened. We've passed that marker of time collectively. There were consciousness groups all over the planet on that date, not just Todd's. But collectively, we are sending a message that we are here on the planet.
Actually, can I just say, because this ties into all the questions we've had, sending a message to all of the graduate planets that we had just passed the marker and that we are now getting into the higher consciousness. That was the message.
And following that event, Kryon then began to reveal information that there are 12 major nodes on the planet, nodes and nulls, and that we had activated one of those pair of 12 nodes and nulls. If we hadn't passed the marker, if we hadn't awakened and done the choir and other things, this information from Kryon would not be given. Slowly, piece by piece, Kryon has revealed that when the Pleiadians visited the planet all over the Earth, they put in, I guess you could call it a dormant system into the planet, imbued into the planets, that should humanity awaken past a certain point, that this system would come online to deliver benevolence and enhance and fast track an awakening process. So in the last several years, there has been different events take place at the nodes on the planet. Kryon says what opens these nodes and nulls, these dormant time capsules, it's designed compassionate events. That's what communicates with them. It's not just the choir. And the last pair of the nodes and nulls was done in a place called Machu Picchu, which there were 2 pairs left to match, but because when you match pair number 11, 12 is automatically known. This paired match, you can hear it in the channel given from Kryon at Machu Picchu last year in November, but it created all of them to be online. And now we are revealed part of the purpose of what they're here for. I think there's still more to learn, but part of the purpose of what they're here for is that the nulls gather all the negative energies on the grids and push them to their matched node. And if you think of this node, energy like the sun, where things just come up into it and it's just evaporated. And it's cleaning the grids of the planet. It's cleaning up, we're cleaning up war, fear, drama, horror, all of those attributes. There's a system in place put here by highly enlightened beings to help us in our shift. So when you talk about the litter, let's get rid of it. And when Lee says there's solutions coming that are going to be delivered, this is part of that mechanism, a physical mechanism that ties in with the planet. And it ties in with our connection to the planet. If you connect with the energy of the earth, Kryon says you're going to live longer. And it's because it's all part of it. Do you want to add?
No. Only this. For years, I refused to record the Q A and put it online. Years. She said, oh, you ought to do it. And all I could think about is when they hear this stuff, when somebody just simply tunes in and hears this stuff, they're going to think we are absolutely smashed out of our brains. And so I didn't want to do it. And then I realized, well, what is that mechanism that makes you not want to do it? And it's just me, not wanting to be seen a fool. Now I'm putting them online.
Thank you, everyone.